Welcome into episode 264 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Scott has a tweet that went viral, and that'll be talked about his opening shift. But before we do anything,
I think this is how we should start every podcast, is just applauding my Twitter use.
Well,
of course.
We would, but I think this episode we have a better way to start. And I'm gonna pass the baton off to lovely Bridget here, and she's gonna go on a rant. What about? I'll let her explain.
Yeah, I said right when we first connected this morning, I would like to take my opening shift and just use it to rant about the officiating in the NHL because it is awful this year. And I don't even know where to start. How many blown calls were there in yesterday's Bruins game? It was ridiculous. It felt like it got worse as the game went on. And this whole entire road trip, it felt like more than 50% of the calls were questionable or wrong. It's hard to watch when it's that bad. And it frustrates me even more because I broadcast college hockey and I think they get it right there. And I don't know where the NHL is failing. Is it from the top down? Like, is there someone that doesn't go over with the officials? This is what a hook should look like. This one wasn't a hook. Like, you need to show examples. You need to have a constant line of communication from the person who's in charge of officiating and to get that information disseminated to all of your officials. I don't know if they're hiring the wrong people. I don't know if they're just not explaining it correctly, but the calls are wrong often. Even after review, they're still wrong. And it should just be much more cut and dry. The rules in the rules book say they explain it how you need to call it, and that's just not what happens in the NHL for some reason. And like I mentioned, in college hockey, there's a guy named Brian Murphy. He just got inducted into the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. He's the head of officiating for Hockey East, which is the conference I see the most. And they feel like they get it right like 80% of the time, 90% of the time, and the NHL feels less than that. And I don't know if they need Brian Murphy to come in and really straighten out. Like, they feel like they need someone to come in and straighten it out because it's gotten really bad.
Yeah, I think and especially as it relates to Saturday night's game in particular, there's a lot to get into because the Bruins end up winning 4-3 in overtime, which is great. That game really probably should have been over in regulation if it wasn't for a couple bad calls that, I know we're going to get into more. My opening shift, so we'll get into that game more, but my opening shift relates to another story from Saturday and that Brian referenced. Jeremy Swayman was named an all-star for the first time on Saturday. He was one of 4 goalies to get voted in by fans, which is great. Normally, an all-star selection wouldn't be opening shift material for me because I honestly don't particularly care about the all-star game. What I do care about is what Jeremy Swayman said after the game when he was asked about what it meant to be an all-star. And he said, he can't do it without his teammates. He credited the Bruins for being a defensively structured team. Said, all the usual things an all-star says, can't do it without my teammates, all that. Then the second half of his answer, unprompted, he says, but yeah, after dealing with what I did this summer with arbitration, hearing things that a player should never hear, it feels pretty special to be in this situation. And my antenna immediately went up and I was like, that's interesting that, you're an all-star for the first time in your career. And one of the first things that comes to mind that you say when asked about it is going back to your arbitration hearing from the summer, which we know he's been on the record in the past of he really hated that process. He said he would never want to go through it again. He would never want any of his friends or teammates to go through it. He said he has also been on the record as saying he wants to remain in Boston and he's glad he eventually got a deal done and all that. But clearly it's still on his mind if he's going to that while talking about being an all-star. And I just think the fact that he said it and potential ramifications of what it might signal as far as his next contract negotiations is really interesting and something that we can get into more.
Definitely. Absolutely. I mean, I like both of your opening shifts. There's definitely an issue with officiating in the National Hockey League. And Bridget, you mentioned college hockey and how it's much better. And I think there's a reason for it. And we could definitely get into that as well. Scott, yeah, a lot of meat on that bone too. It's very curious comments from Swayman. Was it just him being transparent with the media, just not realizing where the comments could be taken? Or is there something behind it? Maybe some strategic levels behind it? I don't know. We'll get into that. For me, look, the Bruins this year, nobody expected them to be first place in the Eastern Conference at the midway point, especially. I just think last year their roster was so talented, so deep. They were up against the cap, over the cap. If it wasn't for injury reserve issues, there was just a sense of like they're not going to be as good. They were still going to be competitive, but not as good. And make no mistake about it, no Bergeron, no Krejci. Like, you lose a bunch of guys. It's a transition year for this Bruins team. How many franchises can in a hard cap era like be first place in their conference in a transition year? And I just think that is oftentimes lost when we're watching these games and we're looking at their deficiencies, and we see where they are in the standings, but we don't necessarily believe that's where they should be just from the eye test and the analytics that back it up sometimes. This team's not perfect. It's a transition year for them, and they're still in first place. So I think it's just an opportunity to, applaud the players and management for going out. I think Scott coined them the Moneyball Bruins at one point earlier this year. And in a lot of areas, they are the Moneyball Bruins. It's again, like, how many teams could say that in a transition year they're first in their conference? Does that mean that we think the Bruins are Stanley Cup contenders? I don't know. We all think there's some work to be done, but halfway through the season, I just think it's worth being like, maybe we need to recognize we shouldn't. A lot of Bruins fans, like, they're hard on the Bruins. They critique every single play, every single game, every single mistake, and seem to not applaud the good things all the time. But here we are. They're in first place. I guess just enjoy it and appreciate that they're doing a lot with a lesser roster than many teams.
Yeah, and the thing is like, you look around the league, and I would say especially in the Eastern Conference, and there's no like singularly dominant team. So even though we sit here and say, yeah, the Bruins are flawed and maybe they're a piece or two away from being a quote unquote true contender, I think a lot of teams in the East are saying the same thing and might even need more than a piece or two. And, the team that looks the best, certainly recently, would be the Florida Panthers, who had a 9-game winning streak before losing to New Jersey on Saturday. And, we know what they did in the playoffs last year. Most of that team's back. They arguably even got better on defense. So I would still point to the Panthers as the team to beat, but, it's not like they've been on fire all season. Like, they got really hot recently. They had some issues before that. Bruins have still managed to stay ahead of them for the time being. Now, it's totally possible that the Panthers just go on a great run and pull away in the second half and they're the number 1 overall seed. But even then, like, I wouldn't expect the Bruins to fall much further than second, third, fourth in the conference. Like, they're clearly a really good team, and they've hit a couple tough stretches and have bounced back. This road trip, we can kind of get into what we think of this road trip overall, because they lose 3 out of 4 games, which you look at and say, well, that's not very good. But they still got 5 out of 8 points. Every single game went to overtime. I thought they finished it with their best game of the trip. They were pretty dominant the second and third periods against St. Louis, especially at 5-on-5. The Blues did get 2 power play goals to tie into Bridget's opening shift on 2 power plays that I don't think they deserved. One was a slash by Brad Marchand. I had to figure out which way I had to move my fingers in front of my camera there. But that was like barely a love tap on the gloves. It was really just a stick-on-stick work. And then Hampus Lindholm gets called for interference when Kasperi Kapanen just flops, like skates right into Lindholm and then flops to the ice, and Lindholm goes for interference. And it's like, that has to at least be both. And honestly, that would have been a situation where I would be okay with only the 2 on Kapanen for diving. But at the very least, it's both. Like, if you call interference an embellishment and move on, but that was pretty embarrassing. And the Blues scored on both those power plays. So if you don't have that, if you don't have the refs just straight up not doing their job correctly, it's over in regulation. They also missed Jesper Boquist getting hooked in the slot on like a grade A scoring chance with under 3 minutes left. So
what did you think of the review of the second, what would have been Hayes' second goal?
I thought they got it right. I thought he was just barely offsides.
Razors seemed to think they got it wrong in the intermission. I don't know if you happened to.
Well, so I don't know if Razor was necessarily saying they got it wrong. I think Razor's point, and one I don't know if I totally agree with him, but I'm open to it. I think his point was more that there should be like a little bit of leeway where if it's almost simultaneous, it isn't really affecting the play and it should just be let go. I'm not really totally with him on that. I think you're either offside or you're not. In this case, it's in the direct build up to the goal. So even though it's very close, he's offsides and it's no goal.
Yeah, it was 4 seconds before the goal. It was like immediately.
Yeah, it's on the exact rush that he scores on.
Yeah, but yeah, no.
But yeah, that was a bailout for the Bruins because that's a play that shouldn't happen. I mean, Shattenkirk just loses Hayes on a stretch pass from below the Blues goal line, and then I thought Swayman probably should have made a save on that. He was pretty good the rest of the night, and that ultimately doesn't count against him. But yeah, it was just kind of like a snapper from the dot that beat him glove side.
Yeah, and that was a crazy long distance pass, and Hayes was just in behind everyone. Caught the Bruins kind of sleeping a little bit, and that changed the game completely because once the Bruins won that challenge, it kind of the momentum really did shift into their favor, and they played well after that. Kind of woke them up maybe that they were about to go down a goal, and they played better after that. I don't know what direction you guys want to go in first, because I'm actually really interested to talk about the Swayman stuff. That's the opening shift that I'm wanting to expand on a little bit more. So obviously it's great that Swayman made the All-Star game, and I think his comments, Scott, about the arbitration and about how, they didn't treat him like an all-star is what he was getting at. He feels like they said things to him like, you're not worth X amount. You're not good enough to be this. And so it has affected him. Maybe it's motivated him to play better. Sometimes that's what happens. Like, I had an old boss who, the more he was mean to me, the better I did, just to spite him. Sometimes that's how people get motivated, but his comments coming in like such a positive moment for him, where he's talking about being an all-star, just show you how much it really bothered him, that arbitration process, where you got to imagine Don Sweeney or whomever was negotiating was saying, oh no, you're not worth that. You're not one of the best goalies in the league. And he's thinking, I am one of the best goalies in the league. Look, I'm an all-star. So not only does it have to do with the past negotiations, I think, Brian, you maybe alluded this a little bit, it might be foreshadowing the upcoming negotiations as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, simply put, is there something the Bruins need to be worried about? Is there truly a rip in the relationship at all going forward? Now, I believe it was Swayman who initiated the arbitration in the first place, correct, Scott?
Yeah, he was the one who filed for it.
Yeah, they were so far off from a fair number that was really his only option.
Well, I mean, the way arbitration works is both sides go in way off a fair number. Like, that's the player files way over what they're going to end up at. The team comes in way under, and that's why it gets uncomfortable, because if Swayman filed at 4.8 million which he wasn't going to get off of, a good season, but one where he was the 1B. He still was not a true number one. So even though the Bruins might know, okay, this is going to end up around 3.5. Well, the only way to get to 3.5 is for them to come in. If Swayman's $1.5 million over, 1.3 over, or whatever, the Bruins have to come that much under. That's the only way you get settled in the middle. So the Bruins have to file at $2 million, or somewhere around there. And then the way arbitration works is you have to go in and argue for why he's only a $2 million goalie. You don't go in and argue, here's why we should settle in the middle. You have to argue for your exact position. So when they file at $2 million, knowing that the arbitrator is probably going to settle in the middle at 3.5, they then have to compare him to other $2 million goalies. And they also have to explain why he's not a 3 or 4 or $4.8 million goalie. And so this is why no one likes going to arbitration, because you have to argue something isn't true. The Bruins know Jeremy Swayman was not a $2 million goalie. But in order to get to that number in the middle, that's what they have to argue. Like, that's how the process plays out.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is like, what is he referring to that like a player should never have to hear, or hearing things he shouldn't have, he didn't want to hear? It's like, because you look at Swayman's numbers prior to this season, 2020, 2021, he played 10 games, 7-3, 1.5 goals against average, 9.45 save percentage, 21, 22, 41 games, 2.41 goals against average, 9.14 save percentage. Last year, 37 games, 2.27 goals against average, 9.20 save percentage. Like, what could they possibly even say against him that's that bad when you have those numbers?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the $2 million is so like insultingly low to have to argue that is what he's worth. I don't even know where you even begin with that. Like, if someone was, I'm trying to like put myself in that situation. Obviously, we don't have contracts like that. We don't have to sit in a room and have our boss be like, you actually suck, so we're only going to pay you half what you wanted. I'm sure.
Just wait for your next podcast negotiation, Bridget.
Man,
I'm hearing through the grapevine that it's not going to be pretty.
I'm testing the market.
But even then, like the numbers, like his numbers, they can't even. That's what I'm trying to say. If you're for the Bruins side, like what can you even possibly say without objectively being like, the numbers are telling you straight up, I'm a elite goaltender. So what were they saying that he didn't want to hear? Like, he splits the load with Allmark, so they don't know. What could they have possibly said to him to work that number down that insulted him so much? I don't know. It's not really subjective. He's objectively a great goalie.
I mean, a big part of it is the comparison. So it's probably them, again, throwing out $2 million goalies that they're saying, well, look, this guy has
you want me to
similar
name
numbers
some?
through this age. And Swayman's going, you're comparing me to that guy? Really? Like, after everything I've done,
let me list some of the guys. So at $2 million, or just above $2 million, we have Dan Vladar. We have, and the funny thing is, in these contracts, some of them, their pictures are just like a face, like an empty face. Like, they don't even have a photo in the NHL. Connor Ingram, Casey DeSmith, Pavel Francouz, Kevin Lankinen, Cam Talbot.
Ingram and DeSmith actually having really good seasons, oddly enough.
Yeah, but that's I'm just listing who's in that range. Some of these guys I don't even really know. And then there are other guys that are under the number that I'm like, okay, those guys are decent. But I mean, if they're saying that Dan Vladar should have more money than Jeremy Swayman somewhere in the league, it's pretty ridiculous.
Right. And again, I would just circle back to, that's the nature of arbitration, is you have to argue things that are ridiculous. Like, it's a broken process. It's why no one wants to go through it, because if the Bruins came in and said, well, okay, we know he's actually, we're going to come closer to the 3.5 million that we think he's worth, and we'll file at 3 because we don't want to be too mean. Well, you know what that means? That means Jeremy Swayman's getting 4 because now 4 million is the middle. And with the Bruins cap situation, that means trading someone away. They would not have been able to afford Swayman for $4 million without trading someone else away. So it sucks taking a young player to arbitration. That's not how you want things to go. But I actually don't really blame the Bruins or Don Sweeney. I've said it before, but they had to play hardball last summer because of their cap situation. Now, to push this forward, where I think it gets interesting is if they work with Swayman in good faith and they agree to a longer term extension with a sizable raise, which clearly he deserves now, then it all ends up being water under the bridge and you move forward together. Where things really get sticky is if you end up in a situation where you find yourself playing hardball with them again, or you're way apart in negotiations and things drag on into the summer and you start moving towards oh my God, are they going to go to arbitration again? Because he is arbitration eligible again. That's where I think things could really go south, and we might be talking about Swayman potentially moving on and looking at another team. So,
well, yeah, he said he's not doing it again. So I feel like it's not an option. Technically it is an option, but in this situation, it's not really if the player isn't willing to do it again.
Well, it would be if the Bruins play hard. I think another thing that's clear is that Swayman's not taking discounts. He clearly believes in himself and believes in what he sees as his value. So if the Bruins were to lowball him or not offer what he thinks is fair, it would still be one of the only tools he has to fight for himself. So, he's still a restricted free agent. There's only so much you can do. He can't test the open market yet. So,
so if you're the Bruins and your end goal is that Jeremy Swayman is your long-term goalie, this is the goalie of the future. This is the guy you want for the next however many years. Don't you think it makes more sense to go in before it ever reaches that point and sign him to a 4-year contract that doesn't require negotiating terribly so far off that you guys are at each other's throats thinking the other person's crazy? So it would make so much more sense if that's the Bruins' plan to have him long term, that they get it done before the end of the season and they doesn't have to worry about it, because clearly it's still in the back of his mind. So just get it done.
Or front of his mind. I mean,
yeah,
he mentions it 2 sentences into talking about being an all-star.
Yeah, and maybe that this is a little, tell that maybe their conversations either aren't happening, or maybe, it's on his mind for a specific reason. Time-wise, I don't know. Does that mean they're not having those negotiations yet that they're that Swayman's happy with currently? Who knows?
So I don't mean to move on from the Swayman conversation. We can certainly go back to it. But I want to jump back to Bridget's opening shift, because I honestly, to an extent, I kind of feel bad for the officials in the NHL. And I agree with everything that Bridget was ranting about. But I feel like they're a product. You kind of said, is it the system failing them? I think it is. And I think here's the problem. I think that, it's been a long time now, but way back in 2000 and was it 05, 06, after the lockout, they implemented all those new, tic-tac rules because they wanted to bolster the NHL product for the mass audiences domestically and elsewhere. And they thought that the best way to do that was, we need more offense in the game. So how do we do that? More power plays. So whatever, 15, 16, 17 years ago, they implemented these new rule changes where essentially everything is a penalty. Like everything's a hook. We all know this, right? But it gets tricky because if you're a ref out in an NHL game right now, and I don't think college implements that college isn't that ticky tacky with their rule book. The NHL is. So these officials, they have to watch the game at ice level that's moving fast, and it's impossible. It would be wonderful if they could always see right in front of the penalty taking place. But when you're looking at the game happening around you, sometimes you're looking at it from the side of players, sometimes you're looking at it from the behind, and you're relying on like the body movements of the person getting hooked or tripped, and you're hoping that it's legit, but they're embellishing and it's tough to tell. And the game happens so fast that they end up misidentifying a lot of calls, and they don't even know. when the NHL tells their officials, hey guys, pretty much everything's a penalty, that's not helping them. It doesn't help them at all. It's like the stick has to be perpendicular. The ref sitting there with a protractor, like trying to. It's too tough for them. I really do feel, and I think if the rules are going to be this excessive, maybe if you're a ref, it's like unless you see it with your own eyes right in front of you, like don't call anything. But then you're gonna have people calling for your head when you don't see something and it is a penalty and you don't call it. I just think I think the system has made it very tough for them to succeed at the highest level. And I get pissed off at them as much as the next person, but if I were in their skates, I'd probably suck too. There's so many opportunities to be the bad guy.
Well, yeah, and it's a much faster game than college, so that's another huge factor. Is things are just happening a lot quicker. So, yeah, I think we've gone even beyond like the changes after the 04-05 lockout, because a lot of those rules at the time I think were necessary. Like things had gone way too far in terms of the clutching and grabbing being allowed, whereas like a guy would chip a puck in and a defender would ride him off like 15 feet towards the boards, and it's like you can't even like chip around a defenseman in that case. So or like guys would get away with legit slashes on hands or legit hooks. And so like a lot of that stuff I was for at the time. And still am. Like I still don't want guys getting away with what they got away with in the 90s. But it's definitely, there's just situations where it goes too far. And the one in particular that I just see a lot this year is it's like every little bit of stick work is a penalty. Like if you make any contact with the body, it's a penalty. And that, I feel like there should be a much more leeway than there's been. And the Marchand slash on Saturday is a good example where it's like he's engaged in a one-on-one battle. There's stick work going both ways, and Marchand's stick for a split second rides up to the glove and like barely makes contact, and now it's a slash because he got the guy on the gloves. And it's like that's like anyone watching that doesn't think that's a slash. Like think about what you imagine a slash to be, and it's not a love tap on the gloves. Like that's where they kind of lose me. I remember there was one a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even like a week ago, where Grzelcyk's battling for position in front of the net, and he like just barely gets his stick into the guy's midsection, and it's a hook. And it's like the guy didn't even move or change his body direction in any way, but Grzelcyk's stick like touched his stomach, so it's a hook. And it's just like, how are you supposed to battle in front of the net if you can't make any contact with your stick? And that's the one above all else that really bothers me right now, is that every tiny little bit of stick work is a penalty.
Yeah, and you want to know what? It's that in combination with they see that little stuff every time it happens, right? And it's stupid. It's not really impeding the play. It's whatever. And then they get wrong the ones that are really important in terms of head injuries, in terms of really bad checks that you're trying to get out of the game. So you see them calling and blowing the whistle for something that's like a little tap on the stick, and then they're not giving the right amount of time or no penalty at all when Frederick gets slashed in the face as hard as possible, or someone finishes a check into the boards and it should be a game misconduct and it's like either 2 minutes or not called at all. Like if you're going to call the little nothing taps of the stick, then you definitely have to call the really big collisions that are dangerous to the sport and the players. And like you said, Brian, it is the system. You want to know how you can tell it's the system, not the individual refs? It happens in every ref crew. It happens throughout the league. In every game, doesn't really matter what specific ref it is. It is completely across the board, just how the game has been officiated this year, which means they're not getting the right direction. Maybe this is how they want them to call it for whatever reason. It doesn't feel like that's a great decision. If they're happy with the product of the officiating this season, then I have even more questions. Like, I don't know how anyone could look at this and go, yeah, that was done correctly. This year has been great. I feel like, and I don't know who this person is. Who is the head of NHL officiating? And like, what is it that they're doing? The annoying thing, and this has always been the issue, fans, broadcasters, all of us, the transparency is just not here. So like, I don't know where in the chain of command this is going wrong. And I don't know what's being done to correct it. Like, we just don't have that information. So when I did get a chance to kind of hear the college hockey side of it, because I had about a 50-minute conversation with the head of Hockey East officiating, it helped me so much in terms of my broadcast, being able to explain what the idea was, what the process was, what they're looking for. Why isn't that available to us at the NHL level?
It's a good question. And yeah, like to your point, it's not the individual ref because it's consistently poor across every game, every night. It's inconsistent. And yeah, it's like they're so fixated on calling, like, because the whole point of them calling these stick infractions in the if it's parallel to your gloves, whatever, the NHL, whoever it is, they would tell you, Bridget, they would say, well, our goal is to, penalize a player that impedes a scoring opportunity. And if somebody has the puck on their sticks and somebody has their stick in their hands, they think that's a hook, and that's impeding a scoring chance. But the problem is, like, it's very seldom that somebody actually hooks somebody and it does impede the person with the puck. Like most hooks that get called, the person with the puck will probably be like, yeah, I didn't even feel it. I didn't even know that was happening. So, but also when these refs are out there, and this has been true for forever, it's not just any new rules, but when you're a ref on the ice, people think that like the first thing that's on a referee's mind or a linesman's mind is like what's going on the ice. The first thing that's on your mind actually is not interfering with the course of play, like not being in the way of players. So like that the game moves fast and they have their specific areas of where they have to go. And like but like if you're a ref out there, you're trying to not interfere with the actual games. You're trying to get out of players' way. And then you're also looking for, set infractions. But yeah, like to be so anal about all these hooking calls and then like see all these hit from behind, just like it's ass backwards, honestly. I feel like maybe, yeah, the game was policed better, Scott, back in the day, like, because if you let X amount go and then it's easy to call what's just completely obvious. But
yeah, Stephen Walkham is the director of officiating, by the way, former ref himself. But yeah, I mean, I've ranted about the hits from behind and boardings plenty, so I won't reiterate that. But needless to say, I'm with you guys on, like, just seems like the priorities are in the wrong place. Where we're cutting down on extremely minor stick infractions that aren't hurting anyone, and to Brian's point, barely impede the play, and then we have like all this gray area around hits that can actually hurt guys, and
that you have a chance to review, and somehow they still get it wrong.
Unfortunately, guys, I posed a question to you, and I don't think there's a clear answer. There's no real solution. The only solution is have a feel for the game. But a lot of these officials played hockey at a high level, and like they do know the game. They should. So it's like I don't know. I don't really. Do you guys have any suggestions on what the
Yeah,
solve
well,
is?
I know what Hockey East does. They basically, you have to take a test every week or every other week. You see a video of a missed call and a correct call, and you have to go through and say this one was right, this one was wrong. Like it's like a quiz that you have to take like you're in school. Like it would say there's 10 different videos and you have to say which one was correct and which one was incorrect. It's a repetition of seeing it and not having it be about you specifically, like it's somebody else that, made this call. And it's just an example of either the right or wrong way to do it. And it's repetition, repetition, repetition. This is what we want. This is what we don't want. And it's drilled in throughout the entire season.
And I think the NHL does stuff like that. Like I know they send reviews to officiating crews of, calls they got right, calls they got wrong. I just think it's a league-wide emphasis that's in the wrong place. Like, I'm not sure they're sending that slashing call against Marchand saying this is the wrong call. I think they're directing refs to call any contact, like stick on gloves. And so to me, it's the standard. Like my issue is more the standard being set at the league level than even refs are always going to be inconsistent. They're always going to miss calls. As I said before, it's just too fast of a game. Like there's just going to be missed calls. It's part of the game. My problem is with the standard, which seems to be that any stick on any part of the body is a penalty.
Yeah, and the reason that they have these standards is because they want offense, because they think that offense markets the league better. But what they don't understand is like too much of anything in life it just gets diluted and like it loses value. Like if you constantly have 7-6 games or no one's going to care anymore. People are going to get used to all the offense and it's no longer going to be appetizing for people. Like what you want is you want a good competitive product. I mean, you don't want 0-0 1-0 games all the time, but to put the emphasis solely on scoring, to just do more scoring opportunities, eventually people will get used to all that scoring and it won't be there's no net effect anymore. So I think that's why the league is where it is, because Gary Bettman, they want scoring. That's what I think. But okay, so.
I mean, I almost can't even blame them because like you've seen it work for the NFL and NBA. They've made rule changes that have led to more offense, and their popularity keeps increasing. So,
the NBA is the difference here. The NBA is for the most part a non-contact league, so there's a lack of physicality that can be part of the game too, to make up for a lack of scoring. Football, you're right, for sure.
Well, I mean, but even the NBA, like you used to be able to get away with like a lot more defending, especially in the low post, than you can now, where it's almost like hockey, where it's like any contact on a guy driving to the rim is a foul.
And college basketball officiating is so much better than the NBA.
Yes. And guess when I stopped watching basketball as much? When they changed the rules. I freaking hate how many fouls there are. It's like it's insane. Like they get it wrong. So I wouldn't say comparing the NHL to the NBA is a good thing to do, because the main reason why I have a hard time watching the NBA is because I think the officiating is bad, and I think they get it wrong a lot, and I think it's really
I don't disagree with you. I mean, officiating sucks in all sports. Like I don't disagree at all.
But the NBA is like up there in terms of I can't even watch it sometimes. Right. I'm like,
but statistically, for every one of you that stopped watching, there's probably been 5 more people who are watching. So
stupid. I just don't like that basketball culture where it's like you get rewarded for like pretending you got hit, like diving and doing. It's frustrating. It's not hockey. I think what happens is when you have people who are used to hockey and you watch that, it's very difficult to be like, okay, how am I supposed to enjoy this when they call every flop a foul, like, and you can't tell. And once again, it's, it happens fast, whatever. We're not going to go on a rant about the officiating in the NBA. But I have my own rant. I'll keep it off
there. There was another polarizing missed call last night that had people up in arms on the St. Louis side. And, here's another example. It was overtime. I forget who it was for St. Louis, maybe Robert Thomas, but he's going through the neutral zone and Pasternak, quote unquote, trips him. But if you watch
Kyrou, Jordan
was it Kyrou?
Yeah.
So if you watch the replay, it's like Pasternak didn't move at all. He like his stick and his body were standing still. So it's like, where is he supposed to drop his, like, I'm not arguing that like the St. Louis player didn't end up getting tripped, but like a Pasternak did not change his course of direction. Like this, the St. Louis player skated into his stick, and it's like, buddy, like, I don't know, like you can only control so much out there. Like how is somebody supposed to get penalized for just being? Like Pasternak was just being in that situation, and so I don't necessarily, if that's what the ref saw in that situation, I might agree with them actually. Like Kyrou skated into the situation.
Yeah, I guess the frustration would be that like kind of based on the standard of that game where everything seems to be getting called, you would think that's a call. Like I said, they got the interference call against Lindholm where it was similar, where like Lindholm doesn't move, he just gets skated into, and it's a penalty. To me, that kind of, and like this, I guess this is one problem where I will blame refs, not the league, is the changing of standard late in the game where like Boquist gets hooked with under 3 minutes left in regulation. That's not going to get called, even though that was a penalty earlier in the game. Kyrou trips over Pasternak's stick in overtime, but it doesn't get called because we're in overtime, I guess. Like, I've never been a fan of that. I know some people are. They say, put the whistles away in crunch time. To me, that just means you allow guys to get away with penalties in crunch time. So I don't like that. I get the Blues' frustration. I just have zero sympathy for them because I think they got the better of the officiating mistakes in this game overall. And also, I think there was a pretty famous trip that the Blues once got away with against the Bruins. So I'm not going to... No Shears Ted for... Shears Ted. No tears.
Yeah, get out of here, Ted.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, no... Actually,
Shears, that was Billy Shears' brother in the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club.
No tears shed. No Shears Ted.
And sometimes we record like really late at night, but it's the middle of the day, so I don't know where that came from.
Hey, this is why I'm a writer by nature, not a talker.
It's okay. I'm paid to talk, and I still mess it up. So
yeah. Well, all I know is one of the best hockey games I think I've ever watched was that Bruins Tampa game 7 with no penalties. Obviously, that's not realistic, but just the game, letting the game happen the way it should. And anyway, okay, so yeah, officiating bad. All right, any other storylines? I mean, I did want to touch on Charlie McAvoy getting 2 goals. I think he's up to, what's he got?
5th and 6th goals, I believe. That was 5 and 6.
Yeah,
right?
so he's got 6 goals, 28 points in 34 games. It's interesting. We've talked about how he doesn't seem to be himself completely consistently this year, but I would beg to ask the question. He's probably on pace for a career high in points, Scott.
I don't have that in front of me, but I'm gonna guess that's pretty close to being true.
Yeah,
you're our mathematician, so get on it. Our stats guy, our analytics guy. It's because Brian and I forgot math.
Yes, boss. I'm on it, boss.
But in any event, like him getting going again. He had a few quiet games leading up to St. Louis in the point department, so important for him to find the back of the net, not just piling up. He's primarily an assist producer when it comes to points, so for him to find the back of the net, I think is important. And you could see it meant a lot to him. He had some emotion.
Yeah, and yes, he is on a career high pace. He's his 0.82 points per game is a career high right now, slightly ahead of 0.78 last year. His career, because he missed so much time last year, his career high in points was actually 56 the year before, and he's on pace for like around 60 right
now. Yeah, he was definitely, it was obviously scoring in overtime is clutch. So when you can get him to contribute in those kind of situations, obviously he's not going to be a goal scorer every game. Like you said, it's his 6th goal of the season. They're not expecting it from him. They more expect the distributing assists and whatnot. But that was a really clutch, important goal. And it changes the outcome of the road trip from being, if they lose that game, what are we talking about today? We're talking about why can't they win a game in overtime? Like it would have just continued this stretch of, watching them almost be able to win a regulation and then not being able to pull it off. And it would have ended in them only getting half of the points on the road trip. Now, at least they come home with a little bit better than 50% of the points. So they come back with 5 out of 8, which and the narrative is a little bit different because they finally found a way to win in overtime. Whereas, Brian, you weren't here for our last episode, but Scott and I spent a long time talking about how, just what is the issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I know a lot of people were criticizing the Marchand Pasternak, miscommunication and coverage on the Vegas overtime goal, or was that Colorado? No, that was Vegas.
That was Vegas.
Vegas, yeah. Yeah, I just think 3-on-3, it's like it's a shit show. Like it's pawn hockey, and it's easy to sit there and be like, yeah, stay on your guy, but I just don't put a lot of stock in it because you lose. Okay, yeah, like so the question is why can't they win in extra time in the regular season? Well, it's like both formats are irrelevant when it comes down to the springtime. It's like, okay, they can't win in the shootout or they can't win on 3-on-3. Well, in the playoffs, it's 5-on-5 until someone scores. So,
well, I said that to Scott. I said, pretty lucky that 3-on-3 isn't the standard in the playoffs because the Bruins wouldn't be making it very far in the playoffs for sure if 3-on-3 was the way that played out in the postseason. But luckily for them and everyone else, it's not. There's a
obviously it means more if you're actually fighting for a playoff spot where every point's going to matter. And I guess if you're the Bruins, it matters if you care. Are you going to be first or second in the division? Do you want to? It looks like that 2-3 matchup is going to be against Toronto, whichever one doesn't win the division out of Boston and Florida. So I don't know. Do you fear Toronto significantly more than wildcard choice X, which obviously we have no idea of predicting exactly which teams those are going to be right now because it's all jumbled together. But to me, I'm actually not super concerned about that. I don't think, especially say you ended up in a wildcard matchup against Carolina, who I don't think it'll be Carolina because I think they're going to climb enough in the Metro division to avoid a wildcard spot. But even New Jersey, that's a good team that just hasn't gotten goaltending. And it's I don't know, maybe Vanacek gets hot for a series, or maybe they trade for a goalie. I don't know that you're setting yourself up for a significantly easier matchup by winning the division. So I'm sort of with you in it's random and I don't really care all that much that they've been bad in overtime. But, you do want to win sometimes. And that's why Saturday was obviously important. They were 2-9 in overtime before Saturday. So, and, at least winning at some point is good. You don't want to truly be awful where you're just losing every time you go to overtime.
3-9 still isn't that good.
But it's better than 2-10, Bridget.
It is better than that. Thank you for helping us with that math. There were a few other things I wanted to get to quick that we haven't talked.
Before you do, can you hold that thought real quick?
Maybe I'll try.
I just wanted to follow up on what Scott was just saying. Right now, the four wild card, the 4 teams right now that are battling for the wild card spots are Tampa, the Islanders, the Devils, and the Red Wings. And it's not like you own any one of those teams necessarily. I mean, the Red Wings play you tough, and and then obviously the division is Toronto and Florida. So it's tough no matter what. It's just about how well you're playing at the right time.
Yeah. So just a few little notes that we didn't get a chance to talk about. So, the injuries, which are obviously important. So, all 3 players didn't play in the final game of the road trip. Allmark, Patra, and Carlo. Zaka was out with illness as well, so the lines were shuffled up a bunch in the St. Louis game and continued to shuffle throughout the night, unsurprisingly. But a really positive thing was that Allmark was on the ice for morning skate and has still, stuck with the team throughout the road trip, which means he it wasn't something as serious as it looked like to start. Now, when we'll see him, we're not sure. The timeline, now that they're coming back home, we'll have more opportunities to actually speak with coaches and players and probably get a bit more information on what's going on with him, but in terms of a timeline, but super positive to see him actually in gear on the ice, not having to completely sit out and rest. Like if he's good enough to skate around on the ice a little bit during morning skate and take some reps, then he's close to being 100%, because otherwise they wouldn't put him in that situation.
Yeah, and he talked to reporters in St. Louis after that morning skate and said that imaging came back clean, which obviously is big news, very good news. He basically said, like, certainly doesn't feel as bad as he initially thought right when it happened. Obviously also wishes he felt better than he does, but it certainly sounds like any sort of serious injury has been avoided, which is great. Carlo will have to miss at least one more game while he's on injured reserve, so we'll see where he's at after that. Zacha, you assume, he was considered a game time decision already, so you assume that's not going to linger. He was not on the ice for warmups, but I think that was probably like, all right, he's still feeling the effects. Just keep him out, like give him the day. Potter, we don't really know. The last we heard was day to day, but we'll see if that lingers. But all of this is another reason why I think you end up feeling not great, but you feel fine after this road trip. Because you lose 3 out of 4, but you get 5 out of 8 points, and you did it with all these guys out of the lineup and all this shuffling. And ultimately, I think like it feels like a trip where you kind of just take a deep breath at the end of it, and you're like, phew, we got through it. Like we didn't truly go 0-4. We got points. You know what? We're still in first place. Now we're going to go home for a bit, and it's like, great. We can get some guys healthy and move on.
Yeah, and you don't feel like the injuries were, so much that they're going to be super long term and hurt the team. And you look back on this road trip and be like, oh, that was when the season ended because XYZ got hurt for several months or whatever. So that has been avoided, it looks like. You also got some pretty decent play out of quite a few players. And Boqvist has been a happy surprise on this road trip. He's kind of had his chance to shine playing on the first line again. Well, at least to start. They changed lines a lot, like I mentioned, but the first line was Boqvist, Geeky, Pasta to start the St. Louis game because Zacha wasn't there. So Boqvist back on the first line. Marchand had 2 goals as well, not just McAvoy. And I don't want to overlook the fact that he finally got his 900th point. They thought that he had it a few games ago because, but they took the assist away. But now he got to that 900th point, which is a big milestone for him as well.
Yeah, and I love that first goal too. You're right, Bridget. Like that's we've talked about it in the past when he was kind of slumping a little bit, relatively speaking, and they need him too. And I love that everything about that first goal. Coyle, DeBrusk, Marchand, all getting their nose dirty, and it's an elite finish and type by Marchand to go short side, top shelf right there, that quickly. But it also, so yes, there's finesse there, but it's nothing but hard work before then, and DeBrusk getting in there, Coyle creating the turnover, and that was an impressive game for him as well.
Yeah. By the way, Bridget, you mentioned all the line shuffling. The lines they ended up on, were really good. Those are the lines that ended up dominating in the second and third period. And just to put some numbers to it over here in advanced stats corner. So first line they load up with Marchand, Coyle, Pasternak. Shot attempts when they were on the ice at 5-on-5, 10-4 Bruins. I don't know. I guess you can call this the second line, maybe. Heinen, Frederick, DeBrusk. Shot attempts when they were on the ice, 13-2 Bruins. Third line, I guess, Van Riemsdyk, Boqvist, Geeky. Shot attempts when they were on the ice, 11-1 Bruins. They kind of just stumbled into these mid-game lines that all clicked and were just taking over. And really interested to see what they roll out Monday. Zaka might be back in, so that changes things. But that was. You look at those combinations on paper, and you're like, outside of Marchenko and Pasternak, like, what are these lines? And I don't know. It worked.
Yeah, it worked because you're missing two centers, which is never good. And so usually that causes some creativity to figure out what you're going to do. But Trent Frederick being able to play center once again came in clutch and helped them out. So you get that Heinen, Frederick, DeBrusque line that, like you said, I'm pretty sure I would call that the second line in terms of what they were working with. So Frederick doing a little bit of everything on the road trip. I think he had another strong stretch too. So some positives to take out of it, 5 points to take out of it, and now they're coming back home from Monday.
And you do have a tough slate of games here heading into the All-Star break. And just to rattle off those opponents, you play the Devils on, is it Monday?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a matinee at the Garden, and then you have the Avalanche at home and the Canadiens at home, and then the Winnipeg Jets, who you have a chance to kind of right the wrong of your first game against them. But they're also, I think, if not right now, they were first in the NHL. So they're playing really well.
They were on a decent winning streak.
Yeah. And the Jets kind of remind me of the Bruins a little bit in the sense of like, well, maybe not the Bruins, but in the sense that people kind of wrote them off before this season. The Winnipeg has had some coaching issues, some leadership issues. And, before the season started, we were talking about, are they selling, Scheifele? Are they selling Hellebuck? And here they are just playing a solid brand of hockey right now. We saw that.
They traded away Dubois. And
right
now, it looks like they probably won that deal. I think Velarde might be hurt right now, but he was playing well for them. And Dubois has been good for LA, but not dominant by any means.
Then you have is it our first look at Is this our first look at Carolina, Ottawa, and Philly all year? Have we played Ottawa yet?
I definitely don't think they played Carolina.
And they haven't played the Flyers. So, and then you have the All-Star break. So, pretty fun slate of games here, I think, to watch.
Yeah, that the Monday 1 p.m.
that is the first for all of those.
Yeah. And it's a holiday Monday, so got an early game, which I'm not usually a huge fan of the 1 p.m. games, but we'll be there. And I have a coach's call mid game that I'm gonna have to sneak out into, but because shameless plug, the first day of the Bean Pot is Tuesday for the women's Bean Pot, so I'll be at Harvard broadcasting those two games the day after. So, and then the following week, the following Tuesday is really the big day, the championship game at TD Garden. So that'll be exciting.
So the semifinal games are at Harvard.
Yeah. Yep. I've never actually broadcast a game there, which is weird because I've been to so many rinks in New England, but I've never done a game there. So this will be the first time. And I don't know how it's going to be though, because you broadcast from behind the net. You don't broadcast from center ice where a normal booth would be set up. So I'm going to have to really hope my vision is as good as I...
Do you have a monitor? Do you have a TV monitor?
I will have a monitor. That is actually what I was asking some of the normal broadcasters about. It's does it just make more sense for me to just look at the monitor when the puck's on the opposite end of the ice? But I don't like to do that, but it's going to be an adjustment.
Yeah.
I wish I had a day or two to a game or two that I could have gone up there and kind of figured it out beforehand, but no, that'll be Tuesday.
Yeah, I always I like the vantage point of being behind the net because you can see plays develop. I've told the story before, that game 7 against Tampa that Brian referenced earlier. In the press box, I was directly behind the goal, so it was especially seeing that winning goal by Horton, the way it developed from that angle was cool. But I can definitely see why for a broadcaster it is not ideal, because especially if it's either an attacking player or a defending player, you're only seeing their front.
Mm-hmm.
You might go an entire shift without seeing their number and that.
Yep. Yeah, you just see the
that
logo
can be hard to
on
identify.
the front just says Harvard. anyway, I'm gonna have to figure that out. Wish me luck.
Luck.
It's like I don't know why, but I feel like for some reason this bean pot, I'm like putting a lot of pressure on myself to do a good job, and I need to like take the pressure off and just be like, just do what you do. But yeah, it's kind of scary because I'm like I'm in charge of the ship, and I don't know if I want to be like I'm the play-by-play person. I have to like lead us in all these directions, and I'm like, now that I'm doing color for the PWHL, I'm like, I kind of like just hanging out, just filling in, some thoughts every once in a while.
Oh, you'll do a great job. We all know that. So yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be great.
Who's winning the women's beanpot this year, Bridget? Who's the favorite?
Oh, I know what you want me to say.
Well, yeah, but it hasn't been BU for a while. I feel like Northeastern's been the
Northeastern's good, right?
Team.
Yeah.
For the last few years, but yeah, this year down.
They're down because they lost their entire top line.
Yeah.
And they all went on to play professionally, and they're like the best players in their program's history. So yeah, it's tougher for them this year. Honestly, I think whoever wins the first game, the BCBU game, probably wins the whole thing. Harvard's on a really down year. They lost their two best players as well. So I feel like it's either going to be BC or BU, and they're playing each other in the very first game that we have. So that's a kind of a cop-out answer, but those are the two best teams in the tournament. I think BC is in first place right now, but BU is not far behind. So
Battle of ComAv.
Battle of ComAv, yep.
Go Terriers.
And I was going to say, and he wanted me to say BU. So
yeah. All right. BU works.
By the way, on the women's hockey front, PWHL Boston got their first win on Saturday. In overtime up in Montreal.
Yep.
That's awesome.
So that rivalry with Montreal getting going.
Always great to beat Montreal, right?
Yeah. So I think that we're good. Do you guys have anything else that you want to get off your chest?
The shortest fashion segment ever. Those jerseys the Blues wore, those should just be their permanent home jerseys. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, don't overthink this.
I thought you were going to comment on the NHL debuting their All-Star jerseys.
Oh yeah.
Which when I first looked at them, I thought I was looking at a couple of gushers that burst. But yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of people hating on them. I mean, they're not crisp. Like I like the ones last year. I think it was last year, the year before. I like the 90s, like when they used to have the All-Star jerseys in the 90s and the late 80s. I just like those a lot. But I might like these ones better than some of the, I don't know. I haven't looked too much into them. Scott, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I kind of like them.
They're different, right?
All-Star jerseys don't need to be like actually great jerseys. It's a silly, gimmicky game. I don't know. Have some fun with it. They're fine.
Yeah, exactly. I don't. They're unique. Yeah. I don't have many thoughts on them.
They're kind of. Am I looking at the right ones? They're kind of meh.
They're very cartoony.
They just have a huge star.
They're kind of just meh. Like
it's very cartoony. It looks like somebody
color.
went to
Like
word
the yellow
art.
ones are just yellow and black. Like
nothing special.
Everyone can play Mario Party in them after.
Yeah, I mean
Justin
great,
Bieber out here modeling them, and they still don't look good. So
they look very cartoony, but honestly, like sometimes those looks grow on you. I mean, here we are. Remember the last couple of years, all these reverse retros, and we can't wait to see all these 90s type jerseys come back, and I don't know.
Yeah, like the neon.
I'm not upset about these. I don't think they're amazing, but they're okay. All right. Any final thoughts, guys?
No, that's it for me.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening. Have a great work week, and we will talk to you very soon.